Do you notice that you're the kind of person that tries to fix people? Maybe romantically, maybe even platonically. You see someone struggling and something inside you lights up. You want to help. You want to rescue them. You want to make things better. And maybe you think, if I can just love them enough, support them enough, they'll change. But somewhere along the way, you lost parts of yourself. This isn't just kindness or empathy. It's often a deeper pattern, one rooted in anxiety, control, or unresolved attachment wounds. In many cases, it begins in early life, where being helpful was how you felt safe, where love meant being needed, and being needed meant being worthy. Fixing others is often a way to avoid facing ourselves. So, where does it start? Many of our deepest relational patterns begin long before our first adult relationships. The need to fix others, that often starts in childhood, when love felt conditional, tied to being helpful, quiet, responsible. You may have learned early that safety comes from tuning into others' needs, from scanning the emotional weather in the room and making peace, soothing others, or taking on the burdens that weren't yours. Hypervigilance can often look like compassion, but it's actual survival in disguise. So now, when someone close to you is in pain, your nervous system doesn't just notice, it quite literally reacts. You might feel a deep urgency to help, not just because you care, but because their distress feels like your responsibility. And somewhere deep down, helping them feel better might be the only way to make you feel safe. Psychologist Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth both found that early caregiving relationships shape how we experience closeness. They called this attachment theory. Now, I do have an entire video dedicated to understanding attachment styles, what they are, how they start, and how to help heal them. So if you are interested in that video, I'll link it just above and I'll also link it down below for you to watch. But as a brief summary, I'll just go over the main ones. Secure attachment, you feel safe to connect and also to be alone. Avoidant attachment, you've learned to stay independent to avoid disappointment. And anxious attachment, you worry you'll be abandoned, so you try to prove your worth through care or closeness. For those with anxious attachment, the instinct to fix others is deeply rooted in fear. Fear of being too much or not being enough. And mostly, fear of losing connection if you stop helping. And over time, these fears can become reflex. You step in, you overextend, not because you're broken, but because you learn that love has to be earned. If this does sound like you, you're not alone. You didn't choose this pattern. It's learned behavior, and it's rooted in survival. But the good news, you can unlearn it. Attachment wounds don't shape how we love others. They shape how we love ourselves. So, the illusion of control. Trying to fix people isn't always about them. It's about us, about soothing something unsettled within ourselves. In psychology, there's a concept called the illusion of control. The belief that we can influence outcomes that are actually outside of our control. It's a form of emotional self-defense. When life feels unpredictable, control becomes our soft blanket. Ellen Langer explains the tendency to overestimate our influence in uncertain or emotionally charged situations. When someone we love is spiraling, struggling, or pulling away, fixing them feels like a way to fix the situation, to prevent loss, to avoid chaos, and to feel safe again. But the truth is, the urge to fix something often is entangled in something much deeper inside of us. It can come from ... codependency, where your well-being is tied to others, or ... emotional enmeshment, where the boundaries between your feelings and their feelings blur. So what actually is codependency? Codependency is a behavioral pattern where your identity and emotional stability are dependent on someone else's needs or moods. Emotional enmeshment, when your emotional boundaries between people are unclear, leading to guilt, over-responsibility, and chronic self-sacrifice. So this might look like you being the person that always texts first, the one who apologizes first, even when it's not your fault. Maybe you're the one that tries to make things better, not just for them, but to calm your own inner peace. Because if you can just fix it, maybe they won't leave. Maybe you won't feel so powerless. When peace feels earned, not given, we confuse control with care. It also links to what psychologists call your locus of control, your belief about what you can influence. If you have a strong internal locus, you believe outcomes depend on your actions. But when misapplied to your relationships, this belief can turn toxic, making you feel like someone else's healing is your job. Locus of control. Rotter explains internal locus as, I control my outcomes. He explains external locus as outcomes happen to me. In relationships, too much internal control can create guilt and false responsibilities for others' behaviors or growth. But healing isn't something that you can force, and especially on someone else. Even with all the love in the world and all the right intentions, you cannot do it for them. It's choosing peace over panic, support over sacrifice. It's learning to sit with the discomfort of uncertainty without trying to micromanage somebody else's path. So, what are you avoiding? Sometimes the urge to fix others isn't just about helping. It's about distraction, a way to avoid what's really going on inside of us. Our grief, our fear, our shame. So we throw ourselves into fixing other people's messes because it's easier than facing our own. So you become a problem solver, the one who always knows what to say. But behind the calm, the self-help exterior, there is often a part of you quietly screaming for someone to ask if you're okay. Because ultimately, fixing them is easier than feeling you. This pattern is often rooted in emotional caretaking, when you are taking responsibility for other people's emotions at the expense of your own. If you grew up in a household where the adults were emotionally unpredictable, withdrawn, or overwhelmed, you may have learned that your role was to keep the peace, to anticipate needs, to manage moods, because your safety depended on it. This is also known as parentification. Parentification is explained by Chase as a child who was forced into an adult role emotionally or practically. In adulthood, this shows up as people-pleasing, as self-abandonment, or being the one that everyone leans on. So, you might say yes when you really want to say no. You might absorb everyone else's pain, believing that it is your job to make them feel better. But that constant emotional labor, it's quietly eroding your own sense of self. Chronic emotional caregiving is linked to low self-worth, codependency, and difficulty setting boundaries, because love has been conditioned to feel earned rather than freely given. The urge to fix others often distracts from something deeper, our own pain. Fixing becomes a thought of avoidance. Many of us who take on fixer roles also experience parentification, having to grow up too soon or to care for emotionally unavailable adults. This is why it feels so hard to stop, because underneath the fixing is the fear of being forgotten, abandoned, or just being irrelevant. You do not need to hold everything together to be worthy of love, and you don't need to disappear into somebody else's life just to feel safe. Love isn't earned through exhaustion. So, a different kind of love. What if love wasn't about fixing? What if love was about presence, not performance? In healthy relationships, love isn't proven by how much pain you can carry. It looks like sitting with them through the pain. Not by solving, but by witnessing. Not by leading, but by walking beside them. It's shown in how you show up for yourselves and each other. Now, admittedly, I used to think that love meant proving myself. That if I gave more, helped more, or just kind of proved my worth, or just loved harder, maybe that would help them be a better partner. Boy, was I wrong. All that effort just left me completely exhausted. I just could not take it. It was too much for too long, and ultimately it just led to a lot of resentment. Not just towards my partner, but also towards myself, because it felt like I wasn't good enough or I wasn't doing enough to help. But realistically, none of that made any sense, but it did in my head at the time. But now I know better. You cannot fix somebody else to fix what's inside of you. You are only responsible for yourself. So, what does healthy love actually look like? According to interdependence theory, healthy relationships are built on mutual influence, not dependence. That means you both bring your whole selves into a relationship, autonomous but connected. You're not seeking someone to complete you, you're choosing someone to grow with. Love is not codependent, it's shared growth. So what does healthy interdependence look like? It looks like emotional responsibility. You manage your own feelings without projecting or rescuing. It looks like boundaries with compassion. You can say no with kindness, and people can say no to you, and it's important that we accept and respect these boundaries within ourselves and towards others. It looks like two full people, not one broken dynamic. You both bring energy into the relationship, rather than just one person continuously repairing it. Because real love doesn't require you to shrink. And that kind of love starts with how you treat yourself. You spent a long time trying to save people, trying to soothe, stabilize, to be the one that they would finally change for. But maybe it's time to ask, what would happen if I turned all of that energy inward? But why is it so hard of letting go of fixing? Letting go of that fixer role can feel terrifying because it's not just a behavior, it's been a part of how you've survived. Fixing others might have made you feel in control, needed, important, safe, but the version of safety comes at a cost. It pulled you away from yourself. Fixing them became a distraction from feeling you, from knowing you. Self-compassion in a new way. Psychologist Neff describes self-compassion as treating yourself with the same kindness you'd offer to someone you love. 3 elements of self-compassion: self-kindness, common humanity, and mindfulness. Self-compassion sounds like, I'm allowed to rest. I'm still learning. This is hard, but I'm still worthy. Research says that self-compassion improves emotional resilience and can help to reduce anxiety. Why does this matter? Studies show that people who practice self-compassion experience less anxiety, less depression, and greater emotional resilience. Because self-compassion isn't self-indulgence, it's self-stabilization. So, the truth is, maybe nobody told you this, but it was never your job in the first place. You don't have to fix them. It is not your responsibility, nor should it have ever been. Your job is never to shrink yourself for somebody else to feel comfortable. You are allowed to choose yourself and show up for yourself. You are allowed to choose you and be there for you. Psychology teaches us that the urge to fix others is rarely about them. It's about our fear of losing connection, about being unworthy if we aren't needed, of confronting our own wounds when you stop tending to theirs. Your healing doesn't come from saving someone else. It comes from meeting yourself with the same empathy, patience, and presence you've always been giving away. So remember, you don't have to be perfect. You just have to be present. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this video. There are so many more available on my channel. I will link it down below for you. If you are interested, please don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you do have any questions, please comment them down below and I will try my very best to answer them for you. Bye.